It was one of those January nights that seemed colder than usual, where the air itself bit at exposed skin and the streets looked deserted under a thin glaze of ice. Angela Johnson, a single mother of two, had just put her children to bed. She moved quietly through her small, drafty house, picking up toys scattered across the floor and checking the locks on the doors. Money was tight, but she always made sure her children felt safe, warm, and loved. She had just sat down with a cup of tea when a sudden, frantic knock at the door startled her. Her first instinct was alarm. It was nearly midnight, and no one visited at this hour. She hesitated, clutching her robe tighter around her as the knocking grew louder, more desperate. With a steadying breath, she approached the door and peeked through the peephole. What she saw made her heart stop for a beat. A tall man stood outside, his broad frame almost shadowing the porch light. His leather jacket glistened with frost, and emblazoned across the back was a patch Angela instantly recognized, the infamous winged skull of the Hells Angels. Her first thought was to lock the door and pretend she wasn't home. But then she saw what stood just behind him. A woman, pale and trembling, held a tiny baby swaddled in nothing more than a threadbare blanket. The infant's face was red from the biting cold, and its little cries carried through the night air. The woman looked exhausted, her lips quivering as she tried to keep the child pressed close to her chest. The man's voice came low and urgent. "Please," he said, his breath forming clouds in the freezing air. "Our car broke down the road. We've been walking for miles. My wife and baby, they're freezing. We just need a place to stay warm for the night." Angela's pulse quickened. Every warning bell in her mind told her to be cautious. She had heard stories about bikers, rough men with dangerous reputations. But one look at the baby's tiny fists flailing weakly and the desperation in the mother's eyes broke through her fear. In that moment, it wasn't about patches, rumors, or reputations. It was about humanity. "Come in," she said, stepping aside. The man gently ushered his family inside, his eyes scanning the modest home. Angela quickly fetched blankets, wrapping them around the shivering woman and child. She rushed to the kitchen and warmed some soup on the stove, her hands trembling slightly, not from fear anymore, but from urgency. The man, who introduced himself simply as Ryder, removed his jacket and tried to warm his wife's hands between his own. Angela didn't ask questions. She didn't demand explanations. She simply did what her heart told her, help them. The night passed quietly, the family huddled together on Angela's couch, their faces slowly regaining color as warmth returned to their bodies. By dawn, they were gone, leaving only a hastily written note on the table. "You saved us. Thank you." Angela read the note twice, folded it carefully, and placed it in her drawer. She thought it was the end of the story. But it was only the beginning. A few days slipped by, and life for Angela settled back into its usual rhythm. She woke early each morning to get her kids ready for school, then walked the chilly streets to her job at the diner. The routine was tiring but familiar. Though she often struggled to make ends meet, Angela carried her burdens quietly, never letting her children feel the weight of her sacrifices. That night with the biker family already felt like a distant memory, a small act of compassion she figured no one else would ever know about. But on the fourth evening, as the winter sun sank behind the rooftops, Angela noticed something unusual. A low rumble echoed faintly in the distance, growing steadily louder. At first, she thought it might be trucks passing through town, but then the sound multiplied into a chorus of engines that shook the ground beneath her feet. The noise made neighbors twitch their curtains nervously. Children playing outside were quickly ushered indoors, and conversations on porches went silent. Within moments, the entire street was alive with the roar of motorcycles. Dozens of them appeared at the end of the block, headlights slicing through the dusky air, chrome gleaming beneath the street lamps. The sight was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. Angela's heart pounded as the convoy rolled closer, their jackets marked with the unmistakable patches she had seen that night. Hell's Angels, an entire pack of them, were heading straight for her house. Engines cut off in unison, plunging the street into a thick, uneasy silence. Neighbors peeked anxiously from behind blinds, whispering among themselves. Angela stood frozen on her porch, her breath visible in the cold night air, clutching her coat as though it could shield her from whatever was about to happen. From the group, Ryder stepped forward, his leather jacket now clean and his demeanor calm but commanding. The rugged lines of his face softened slightly when he saw Angela. Behind him, the same woman Angela had sheltered stood proudly, a warm coat wrapped around her shoulders, the baby now bundled in layers and looking healthy. "Angela," Ryder called out, his voice carrying across the yard, steady and clear. "We didn't get the chance to thank you the way you deserve." Angela's throat tightened. She stammered nervously, "You don't owe me anything. I just did what anyone would have done." Ryder shook his head firmly. "No, not everyone would have opened their door. Not everyone would have looked past a patch and seen people." He raised his hand slightly, signaling to his brothers. One by one, bikers stepped forward, carrying boxes and bags. They placed them gently on Angela's porch: groceries, diapers, children's clothes, warm blankets, even toys. The stack grew higher and higher until Angela's modest home looked like it had been showered with abundance. Tears welled in her eyes as she realized what was happening. These men, feared by most of the town, had come not with threats but with gifts, repayment for a kindness she hadn't thought twice about. Her neighbors watched in stunned silence, unable to comprehend the sight of dozens of hardened bikers showing reverence to a single mother. But Angela understood. That night on her porch, lines between worlds blurred, and something greater than fear emerged: gratitude, loyalty, and an unspoken promise that her life was about to change forever. The days after that unforgettable night turned Angela's life upside down, in the best way possible. At first, she thought the bikers' arrival had been a one-time gesture, a thank you for her kindness. But Ryder and his brothers made it clear, they weren't done. They began showing up regularly, not to intrude, but to help. One morning, Angela woke to the sound of hammers and voices outside. When she rushed to the porch, she found several of the men on ladders, repairing her leaky roof. Another was fixing the broken step on her porch. In her driveway, a few of them were bent under the hood of her old car, tinkering until the engine purred smoother than it had in years. Angela stood speechless, her children tugging at her robe and squealing with excitement. Her neighbors, however, were wary. At first, they muttered among themselves, their fear painting the bikers as dangerous criminals. But as days turned into weeks, those same neighbors began to notice something remarkable. The men who once inspired fear were now clearing snow from sidewalks, carrying groceries for the elderly, and keeping a silent watch at night. Crime in the area all but vanished. Families who once double-locked their doors suddenly felt safer knowing that a group of leather-clad guardians were rumbling through the neighborhood. For Angela's children, the bikers became heroes. Ryder, with his towering frame and gravelly voice, often let them ride on his shoulders, making them laugh until their bellies ached. His wife, Maria, began visiting Angela often, bringing homemade meals and warm bread, insisting they eat together like family. "Sisters don't ask, they just show up," Maria would say with a smile. Angela, who had lived years in quiet struggle, found herself surrounded by a strange but beautiful new family. For the first time in forever, she no longer felt alone. The trust fund Ryder's brothers set up for her children stunned her the most. She had cried when they explained it. It meant her kids would one day go to college without the crushing fear of debt. But perhaps the moment that touched her most came one evening, weeks later, when Ryder pulled her aside. The convoy had just finished dropping off more supplies, and the sound of laughter from her children mixed with the rumble of motorcycles in the background. Ryder's hardened expression softened as he looked at her. "Most folks cross the street when they see us," he admitted quietly. "Some spit at us, some run. That night, you opened your door. You didn't see criminals. You saw a freezing mom, a helpless baby, and a man desperate to protect them. You gave us shelter when no one else would." He paused, his eyes shining with something deeper than gratitude. "You'll always have us at your back. You and those kids, your family now." Angela blinked back tears, her voice trembling. "Sometimes all people need is a little kindness," she whispered. As the bikers mounted their motorcycles and roared off into the night, Angela didn't feel fear in the sound anymore. Instead, she felt safety, strength, belonging. Her small act of compassion on one freezing night had sparked something she could never have imagined, a bond that turned strangers into family, and fear into love.